Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Acuity Knowledge Partners webinar entitled Fuel Your RFP Process, Provide the Right Catalyst for Exceptional Growth and Scalability. My name is Pedro Armstrong, Senior Director of Business Development at Acuity Knowledge Partners in the Americas, and I will be your moderator this morning. For those of you on this call that may not be familiar with Acuity, please allow me 1 minute to give you the helicopter view of Acuity Knowledge Partners. With 20 years of experience under our belt, we are the #1 provider of research, analytics, and business intelligence for financial institutions. Today, we support 400 clients, cutting across investment banking, commercial banking, asset management, corporates, and consulting. And we support these clients from our various delivery centers, namely in India, Sri Lanka, China, and Costa Rica. At Acuity, we employ 4,000 subject matter experts that work as a seamless extension to these 400 clients. And we perform low, medium, and high complexity activities and tasks that are all bespoke based on our unique client requirements. One point I'd like to underscore is each analyst team that works for a client works only for that client and does not work for any other client. So very much an extension. We understand the culture of those particular clients, and we do not work across, one team does not work across other teams. In 2021, Acuity Knowledge Partners was ranked Best Outsourcing Service Provider by Waters Technology in its annual rankings. And this award reflects the service excellence that Acuity provides to clients in helping them to meet their transformation objectives, helping them to scale their processes, meet their productivity and efficiency goals, and more importantly, unlock the potential of their onshore talent while leveraging an onshore team with us, and that helps to drive revenues higher. So for those of you who are not familiar, that's the 10,000 view, and we're happy to provide additional details. We could speak about Acuity for 1 hour, but that's not why we're here today. So let's turn our attention back to the webinar this morning. We have a huge attendee turnout, and folks joining us this morning represent these institutions. As I was looking at the titles, I saw heads of marketing, I saw heads of RFPs, heads of business development, RFPs and DDQ managers, and that list goes on and on. I want to say welcome and thank you very much for joining us this morning. It will not be a wasted 1 hour of your time. From a quick housekeeping perspective, we please ask everyone to stay on mute to avoid any disturbance. The duration of this webinar will be 1 hour, and we will end with a Q&A discussion. To ask a question at any point, please ask that question and type it into the Q&A box that you will see at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to answer that question at the appropriate time. If we are unable to answer that, the panelists have all agreed that they will answer those questions, and we will get that back to you by the end of this week. So thank you for your patience. Finally, we're going to have 2 polling questions. We ask you to please answer those polling questions. You will hear us for a long period of time, but we would love to hear you. And these polling questions will touch on challenges and how you are probably trying to solve those challenges. So we look forward to hearing what you have to say. So over the next 1 hour, we're going to discuss all things RFP related. And joining me this morning, we have 4 industry experts in their own right. But before I introduce them, let us set the scene for this morning. Why are we having this RFP webinar? I think most of us would agree here that RFPs continue to play a pivotal role in generating new business for the asset and wealth management community. Also, RFP teams need to be both resilient and agile in how they adapt to some of the changing global dynamics. As well, added to that is institutional investors are asking for more nuanced data, nuanced information, ESG, diversity and inclusion, and this is often asked on an accelerated basis. So it puts pressure on RFP managers to really manage what is a dynamic process. So we at Acuity felt that, the stage was set to sit with some industry practitioners and experts in the RFP space and hear their opinions, hear their thoughts on really what is the best way forward. So with that as our backdrop, let me introduce our panel this morning. Joining me, we have Andre Guzman, Global Client Services Manager at Capital Group. We have Jennifer Taglia, Senior Vice President, Head of Business Management for Distribution at Voya Investment Management. We have Sheetal Josipura, Head of RFPs, Client and Data Reporting at Matthews Asia. And we have our very own Salaja Devareddy, Senior Director, Head of Fund Marketing Services at Acuity Knowledge Partners. Good morning, all of you, and welcome. And a special good morning to Sheetal and Andre from the West Coast. I think it would be very difficult, right, for us to have a discussion without really understanding the impact the pandemic has had on us. So perhaps that's where we can get started. Would love to hear your thoughts on, the impact that the pandemic has had on the asset management industry, specifically as it relates to RFPs, and more importantly, in your opinion, has remote working, has it been a boom or has it been a bane for RFP teams? And Jennifer, perhaps we can get started with you.
Sure, Pedro, and thanks for having me. I think the biggest impact to us has been that the recognition that most work, especially RFP work, can be done from anywhere. This really widens the talent pool for us and allows us to offer more flexibility to our RFP writers. We've also been able to do more with less. The ability for people to work non-traditional hours when needed, along with less distractions, has resulted in increased productivity and overall job satisfaction. One drawback, though, that we've seen is in training new and more junior writers. So in an office environment, you have the benefit of ad hoc conversations over the cubicle wall. And now it can be more challenging when everyone's working from home. So encouraging communication through instant message, email, phone calls is important to foster the right culture on the team and make sure your more junior talent has all the tools to be successful.
Thanks, Jen. So it sounds as though we can do a check next to boom for you, right? Better job satisfaction, increasing productivity, better communication, all very good points. Something you mentioned that I really want to underscore for everyone is RFP work can be done anywhere and widens the talent pool. And obviously, Salaja will touch on that because we've benefited from that at Acuity. But thanks, Jen. Sheetal, perhaps, would love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks, Pedro. I actually completely agree with Jen's comments. I would say to add to that, over the past few years, the industry has seen an increase in complexity of RFPs. Without the ability to have on-site due diligence meetings during the pandemic, investors have relied even more on RFPs and due diligence questionnaires to make decisions on where to allocate their investment. As a result, RFP writers have needed to increase collaboration with teams across the firm to create more custom responses than we've seen in the past. I think collaboration at our firm continues to work at a high level, and we haven't seen remote work really have a negative impact on that process. On a positive side, I'd say many RFP writers also prefer to work on custom responses in a quiet space and have been able to do that while working remotely. There's obviously a benefit of being together, I think, as Jennifer said, talking over the cubicle wall. So that's something we do miss, but we use email, instant messaging, as well as team meetings to get to that same point.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sheetal. So what I'm hearing is another boom for the remote work environment, better communication, collaboration with teams. And as you mentioned, better custom responses. And I can only imagine if you have better custom responses, perhaps you'll have a higher ROI and winning those particular mandates. So excellent. Thanks, Sheetal. Andre, would love to hear your thoughts, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pedro. So without being too dramatic, I would say that the biggest impact of the pandemic has really been a confrontation of many assumptions that many of us have had around what it means to be productive, what it means to work from home. And I certainly believe it is a boon. So, when we think about at CG, we saw a record growth in both volume and complexity for responses. And that makes sense, right? So uncertainty really drives more questions. That challenge specifically, and being remote, really forced us to engage with each other and our internal stakeholders in a way that was far more intentional than we had in the past. And that really drove up ultimately our productivity as we combated that volume. It's also allowed us to think more broadly about hybrid work schedule when things return to normal. And like Jennifer and Sheetal said, we're really thinking about expanding our recruiting efforts across multiple CG locations. So overall, a boon, and we've certainly resulted in better relationships across our team and business.
Thanks, Andre. So, as you said, categorically a boon, greater productivity, collaboration, coordination across stakeholders. Salaja, Jen mentioned it. The ability to work from anywhere has definitely been a catalyst for us at Acuity. Would love to hear, how your team has been adapting from that work from home.
Sure, thanks, Pedro. First of all, thank you for having me on the panel today. Regarding the impact of the pandemic and work from home, I completely agree with my co-panelists' observations. We've also noticed a similar trend at Acuity. Within my department, I have 350 analysts working across 65 client accounts on marketing, RFPs, consultant databases, client reporting, and digital marketing areas. Specifically within the RFP space, we again cover a wide spectrum of activities, be it quarterly DDQs, consultant questionnaires, maintaining the RFP content database, to responding to the more high complex institutional RFPs and mandates. In the last 18 to 24 months, we have seen increased activity in this space. What I mean by that is there's been an increase in the volume, increase in complexity, more online questionnaires being asked. The DDQs have become lengthier. There's a lot more quantitative data which is now being asked in these questionnaires, and of course focus on some of the newer areas like BCP, ESG, and diversity and inclusion. RFP teams across the globe have spent longer working hours trying to tackle this increase in volume and complexity. Pedro, as you know, at Acuity, we've had increased requests from clients asking us to expand their RFP teams with us, and the demand for experienced RFP writers has shot up since the pandemic. But I would say on the brighter side, as Jen rightly pointed out, work from home has opened up new avenues of talent pool to tap for RFP managers. Today, there is a greater acceptance and recognition that it is possible to have teams in a different time zone and use this expanded talent pool to one's advantage. So overall, I would say work from home has been positive for RFP teams, and the hybrid resource model is here to stay.
Thank you, Salaja. And if the panelists would allow me to join you, I would also say it's a boom because what I've seen certainly is better coordination and communication between onshore and offshore teams. So it's been very seamless working across continents. So, I will also check the boom with you. Now, one thing that you have all underscored has been increasing volumes, increasing complexity, those more focused questions, etc. So if there are more RFPs, I guess the question that I have to ask you is, are you responding to all of these RFPs? Are you screening RFPs where you have a better chance of winning? Do you have a framework in place to select, which RFP you go after? Sheetal, perhaps, we can get your thoughts here.
Yeah, I'd say we do have a process set in place. And the first step is really just make sure we meet all the qualifications of the opportunity, that we have a competitive product versus the peers to put forward. If we meet those, then we go speak to the sales teams to really get their opinion on the ability to progress and ask questions such as, have we had any conversations with this prospect? What is their view of our product and our firm? Have we had any luck with previous opportunities? And then obviously we have to look at team capacity. There are times when there's so many questionnaires, and we've seen this, I'd say last year quite a bit, that we couldn't really figure out, well, what's the highest priority? What should we move forward with? And then having those discussions to say, okay, we've got X number of RFPs, we can only do, half of those. Which ones should we move forward on? And really thinking what's the highest probability and making a decision on that to then best proceed. And then lastly, we take a look historically. What's our track record? Have we seen certain opportunities that we continue to not progress on? Are there certain clients or prospects that don't ever put us forward to the next step? Should we continue to submit to those investors? So always taking a look to the history as well.
Okay, great. So thanks, Sheetal. So I don't want to divulge the Matthews Asia secret sauce, but it sounds as though what you're saying is you have put a very strong process in place, right? So you have a process. You're looking at your product versus the competition. You're speaking to sales to really understand what has been the historical performance of winning those, those particular investors for that product. But then you have to think about your team's capacity. So that's great because I think capacity is generally being an issue. Thanks, Sheetal. Andre, because considering that Capital is the largest active manager, right? How are you approaching this?
For sure. So it's definitely a complex and critical topic, and I'm going to mirror a lot of what Sheetal was discussing. So from a best practice perspective, really anchoring in ROI. And for RFP leaders, that means strong alignment with your distribution partners to really streamline that go, no-go process. And we really, again, like you said, Pedro, how do we focus on the right RFPs? So to do that, RFP leadership really needs to communicate consistently with its sales partners around, and again, to echo Sheetal, right? Effort and cost to complete RFPs. That's both specific opportunities and then in the aggregate. So think about like a quarterly or annual reporting cycle. Obviously the need for capacity analysis, right? So what is your ongoing and current capacity? You have to be really clear when prioritization conversations are needed and when trade-offs need to be made. That has to be a very clear signal to your sales partners. And then finally, historical competitiveness, right? So both product, sales channel, that all needs to be incorporated into your communication with sales leaders. And leveraging that information, it really is up to sales leaders to provide those guardrails for their teams regarding which opportunities to pursue. So I don't think it's controversial for anyone on the call, right? Those opportunities with really strong relationships across the right product parameters and with those higher win rate probabilities, those are the opportunities to be prioritized. We also try and push for what we call no blame feedback loops or debriefing discussions, really trying to evaluate those pursuit decisions and just try and learn and get better and better every time. So that's really the kind of disciplined approach that we strive for here at Capital. But I can't overstate it. That disciplined approach really has to come from sales leaders. And at CG, some of our sales partners do this really well, and we see higher win rates. We see a very seamless production process with those groups. Others, again, and I'm sure it mirrors folks' experience, do have a throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks approach at times. But for those teams, it's important that we continue to support them and really just try and engage even more with their leadership, right? Focusing comments around positive reinforcement, where is success being placed in other parts of the business, and then just continuing to be vocal about, feedback loops, debriefing conversations to keep the conversation going with those groups.
Thanks, Andre. So, Capital Group definitely ROI in completing an RFP. As you mentioned, is the product, so similar to Sheetal, is the product competitive versus others, but also what has been the historical competitiveness of that product. So that seems to make sense. I love the winning strategy. I assume that's no secret sauce there. If you have a strong relationship and it's mixed with the right product parameters combined with a higher win probability, and that's what you go after. So thank you. When I think about what you and Sheetal has just mentioned, it sounds as though the RFP qualification process is certainly not straightforward. It requires discipline. It actually requires, distribution, sales, as well as RFP teams to communicate well with each other. And, there should be that strong feedback mechanism in place to identify the right RFP to pursue. Jen, if I come to you for a second here. So Voya has multiple business lines and target customers. So I am pretty sure that it makes it even more complex, to have the correct and customized messaging for each of those clients. So how do you manage this at Voya?
Sure, Pedro. It's important that our RFP writers understand our clients' needs, no matter which segment the client is a part of. We need to understand what's important to the client, and spending time with the salesperson at the start of the RFP is really important to get that context. Our writers are primarily experienced writers, which helps them to be able to customize responses based on their understanding of the client needs. So they work hard to deliver the cleanest drafts possible to the sales and investment teams. And this allows our stakeholders to focus on making suggestions to make sure our proposal is aligned with the client's interests, rather than focusing on correcting typos or determining if questions are fully answered. So a manager or peer review also helps to reinforce the process. And it really takes collaboration and a strong partnership with sales, consultant relations, and investment teams to make sure we're positioning ourselves in the best way that we can.
Thanks for that, Jen. A few gold nuggets I would imagine for folks. So intuitively, it makes sense. Understand the client need, and who best understands the client need than a salesperson, if he and her are doing their job correct, right? And once you understand that need, then obviously you unleash your senior RFP talent to respond. And so that seems like a very strong process to have in place. So thank you. Up to this point, I mean, we've discussed the benefits. I think they're all boons from a work from home environment. The RFP qualification process, I think Capital and Matthews, you need to have a process in place. You need to have strong communication, etc. Jen, of course, your gold nuggets just now, made a lot of sense. I think though, as you are running these processes, there must be some additional challenges that you're faced with. So while we're thinking about those challenges, let's segue into our polling question. So if we can pull up those two polling questions, that would be great. We can have the audience also participate as well. And so there are two polling questions. The first is multi-choice, sorry. The second is single choice. For the second one, I will ask you to please scroll all the way down so you can see the various options. We will leave this on screen for 60 seconds or so. But while that is on screen, we will test your ability to multitask, because we will turn our attention back to the panelists and we will ask them a question that's very important. And it's another pillar in the RFP process, which is content management. So there's a well-known saying in RFP circles that content is king. And so having an accurate and evolved content management system or content library, it has played a pivotal role in winning new business as well as retaining clients. So how does your teams manage to keep their content current? And do you face any roadblocks? And Jen, perhaps we can kick off with you.
Sure, Pedro. Every RFP manager dreams of having a dedicated content manager or content management team. We don't have that luxury, but we recognize that content management is important and takes a deliberate commitment of time and resources. And we've tried over the years to carve out time from one writer's job to allow for content management, but inevitably RFP volume gets in the way. So the best way we know how to manage the content is to have process and protocol around timely updates to language and also manage it really closely. So otherwise, we've seen the database get out of date over time, and that becomes a much, much bigger project. So we schedule periodic reviews and revalidation of our content, and we track it like any other project with a due date and an estimated number of work hours to complete.
Okay, thanks, Jen. For all those on this call that don't have a content manager or content management system, Jen is recommending putting stress a strong process protocol and manage it like a project. Have a well-defined due date, estimate the hours to update this, and ultimately stick to it. Great. Sheetal, what can you offer the audience?
Yeah, I agree with Jen's comments. I think at some larger firms, content management is actually a full-time job. And so while we're a smaller asset manager, we don't have the opportunity to have one content manager. It's still really important. It's an important component of the general RFP completion process and also for client compliance review. When working on a questionnaire, we aim to update our RFP database with new language as soon as we can. I think the issue that we face more often is actually working on our annual and quarterly review process of standard language. It takes away from regular work, and then also our subject matter experts may have other priorities at the time that we send them questionnaires. Or not questionnaires, questions to update. So when we're thinking about this, one thing that we've done recently has engaged our Acuity DDQ team to help us in updating RFP responses. So sometimes our RFP writers are busy and are moving on to the next project. We'll send the Acuity team our updated responses and ask them to update our database for us. Additionally, They're also helping us build our annual audit process and reviewing all of our responses to see what has been updated recently, what needs to go to SMEs, and then also gathering information as to how can we split this up so SMEs aren't overwhelmed. I think that's one thing. If you send them everything they have in a database, it's just too much to review at one time. So splitting that up throughout the year, and how do we create that so they're reviewing everything not at one time.
Okay, great, Sheetal. So Jen provided one option. The other option is to leverage Acuity. So, as you respond to these RFPs, that response comes to us, we update the system, and embedded in there, another benefit is we can do the audits and ensure you have the latest and greatest responses in your RFP content database. Thank you, Sheetal. If I turn to Salaja here for a second. So Salaja, you manage more than 30 RFP engagements. Small, medium, large asset managers, some boutique, very boutique firms. What has been your experience on the importance of effective content management?
Oh, Pedro, I do agree that content management is a critical component in the RFP engine. As you can imagine, if the latest content is available in an organized and more importantly, an easy to retrieve fashion, then RFP writers can spend more time on delivering those differentiated pitches instead of running behind different teams or sources trying to gather content. This is specifically true for global asset managers who have multiple local or regional offices because having an efficient system ensures that they have uniform messaging which is sent across their different regional offices. Personally, for us, it's been our experience that a well-maintained and up-to-date content system is really a boon when you're training new RFP writers. So I think everybody agrees this is a critical area, but at the same time, most teams usually struggle to manage this, mainly because RFP process and pipeline is very dynamic, and responding to RFPs almost always takes a priority. I don't think it's fair enough because as RFP managers, you would want your star RFP writers to complete mandates and win new business instead of just updating content on a database. So at Acuity, we bridge this gap with our RFP content management services. We are in the RFP space for over 12 years now and have a thorough understanding of pretty much all the tools which are out there in the market. Equally, our team of DDQ writers and specialists, they're very well versed with different asset classes, client products, and all the nuances related to each of these content systems. So in our RFP practice, we combine both these strengths, and we've helped a lot of firms set up an efficient content management process. What I mean by that is we start right with creating the correct content structure in the first place, the right folder structure to save all the information. Then we go about collecting the responses or content from different sources. It could be previously completed DDQs, the existing content system, the client's internal systems, or the SMEs. And then we upload content onto the database. If there's any old content, we archive it. We manage content expiration timelines, their refresh timelines, to the end process of compliance or legal sign-off. In fact, in the last few years, we have actually helped a lot of our clients make use of some of the newer features that these tools offer, be it tagging or auto-link or auto-populate for that matter. As you can imagine, this kind of streamlined approach comes with a set of tangible results. We have seen quicker turnaround times, improved response rates, faster compliance approvals, and also the ability to manage regulatory and geographic nuances. I'm very proud to share that we have actually helped a lot of our clients maximize their return on investment in these tools.
Thank you, Salaja. Well said, well articulated, and obviously a strong service offering that we provide for our clients. We have the polling results back, and it would be great if we can all see these results. So as we see what folks are saying, volumes and complexity increasing, absolutely. I think that's table stakes in the RFP game today. But equally, ongoing maintenance of the knowledge base. And I think Jen and Sheetal just provided two options, to help you there. So obviously, we've addressed that, but good to see. Difficulty to find the right talent and skills, 26%. We will be touching on that shortly. And if we move to how are you looking to solve that, I guess for the difficulty to find the right skills and talents, folks are still trying to hire more onshore resources. Perhaps that would also help you to address maybe the ongoing maintenance of the RFP databases. For those of you who have already outsourced, I will say I'll be presumptuous and I will say thank you. Perhaps it's not with us, but equally, definitely a viable option. For those of you who have not found a viable solution as yet, hopefully post this call, there will be enough nuggets that you can think through what a strategy would be there. So thank you for your responses. And so far, we have discussed everything around RFP writers. We've discussed content management. We've discussed the increase in volumes. We've discussed screening RFPs, but we've not actually touched on the RFP writers themselves. So we don't want anyone who's dialed in to be angry with us. So let's go there right now. I think most of us here would agree that the RFP writing, it continues to remain a niche domain. You require skilled RFP talent. That's hard to attract. We just had that, but it's even more difficult to retain once you've attracted them. So as RFP managers, you have to find smart and efficient ways to manage those resources. Can you please share with us, how are you handling this? And Jen, perhaps we can start with you.
Sure, Pedro. First, I think understanding each member of your team, their strengths, their goals, and their capacity is really important. I would argue there's actually two types of RFP writers. Those that love writing RFPs because they've mastered it and they're familiar with the challenges of the process, and those that are using the RFP writer position as an avenue to other opportunities, as it exposes you to the entire firm in a way that a very, very few roles can. As an RFP manager, it's really important that you learn which type each person on your team is and to structure their role in a way that fulfills their ambitions and gets the best out of them. So for RFP writers that want to stay in the role their entire career, find ways to challenge them, find ways to keep them engaged, find ways to leverage their deep institutional knowledge, and make sure they're being recognized for what they bring to the team. And they'll give you their best efforts and go the extra mile. I think for RFP writers that are using the role as an opportunity to grow within the firm, make sure they're given stretch assignments. Be sure to give them the opportunity to lead projects outside day-to-day RFPs and DDQs, and be sure to let them know you'll help them grow however you can. But have those honest conversations with all of your team members. We find this approach to help to build a better team dynamic with writers who are willing to go the extra mile for you and for the good of the firm. So I would also add that we're able to focus our writers on new business opportunities since we added Acuity writers to our team. So the Acuity team completes our recurring monthly, quarterly, and annual questionnaires and DDQs. This has been really helpful in not only managing the volume for the team, but also challenging our writers with more complex assignments.
Thanks, Jen. Sheetal, perhaps we can get your experience as a smaller firm.
Yeah, I would say as a smaller firm, we tend to hire more experienced RFP writers. Finding experienced writers can be difficult as there's a limited set of writers who know asset management and the RFP space. So having a strong network is one way that we go about that. And then also being willing to train someone who may be less experienced, but will help us build the right team. And one thing is keeping our current writers engaged. So allowing them to use their time wisely and have them focus on the high priority RFPs. So similar to Jen's comments, we've hired Acuity to help us with our standard DDQs, the recurring annual or quarterly questionnaires that were taking valuable time away from our experienced local RFP writers. That's actually increased our team's capacity and similarly allowed our local writers to build upon their skills as they can work on more difficult questionnaires.
Thanks, Sheetal. And if we go from small to large, Andre, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. So I completely agree with Jennifer and Sheetal. Maybe I'll take a different perspective. So I think it's also really critical that your stakeholders have a clear understanding of what your RFP writers' roles and responsibilities are. no secret, right? RFP teams tend to sit at the center of a large web of information, internal relationships, and that position can really naturally pull your RFP writers in many different directions, and that leaves less time rather for those higher priority requests, and creates an environment that is prone to more fire drills, and that really leads to long-term writer burnout and turnover. So critical that you identify your roles and responsibilities, as well as the roles and responsibilities for everyone in your RFP ecosystem. So that clarity really hoping that it buoys the writers with a measure of consistency as they work through their projects and day-to-day work. It'll give your stakeholders a more seamless experience and really a better understanding of what your process is. And that's really going to unleash your ecosystem to focus and hopefully bring home the work that really matters to your business. And just add on, even though our work with Acuity has just begun, we're applying this approach to our Acuity partners as well, right? So not just assuming that Acuity is going to be the manpower silver bullet that we can just throw at any challenge, but we're really looking at it as a strategic capability and making sure that it has its own mission and objective, like Sheetal and Jennifer mentioned, right? That fits within our broader RFP ecosystem.
Thanks, Andre. So if I were to distill what I just heard, so Andre, obviously roles and responsibilities for your team make sense, including the roles and responsibilities of Acuity, given that like you, we will also be, I guess, somewhat drinking from a fire hose in terms of the information that we have access to. Sheetal, I agree. Focusing your experienced talent, writers on the high priority RFPs, that's great, and so there needs to be a way to bifurcate RFPs from DDQs for them. And then Jen, the model manager, right? Regardless of if they want to stay in RFP writer or if they want to use it as a stepping stone, challenging them and helping them to grow is incredibly important. But I think to be able to achieve all of that, you definitely need to alleviate the burden of the increasing volume and complexity. So I know that all three of you have actually decided to partner with Acuity. And in partnering with Acuity, that brings in the concept of outsourcing at some level. So I imagine there must have been some difficult or different opinions, so to speak, or concerns when you decided to partner with us or to embrace outsourcing in general. What were some of your key considerations in partnering with us, and how has it been so far? Jennifer, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Pedro knows very well that we considered outsourcing for quite some time before we ultimately hired Acuity. Our main considerations were having the right talent supporting our business, communication, and team dynamic. So in terms of talent, we needed writers who had experience with asset management RFPs. We really needed them to be interested in answering the questions completely and not simply cutting and pasting. And we also wanted to make sure we established good communication with our writers and with our manager. So the key to the communication concern was that there was some time overlap when the team could check in with questions or concerns by phone or video, right? So we saw an opportunity through natural attrition on the team, and we decided to try it, and we think it's been actually really successful. So for us, I think there's a few key factors to success. One, it was really, really important that our Acuity resources are viewed as an extension of the team. Secondly, the time and effort spent upfront on the documentation and the training is well worth the benefits in the end. And then I think finally, project management was really key to the transition. Acuity truly partnered with us on that. They kept us on track with a roadmap. They highlighted risks to the timeline so that we can make changes as needed. And ultimately, we transitioned the work to Acuity so we could leverage the skills of our onshore team for new business opportunities. We think it's worked pretty well. We get the best out of our writers this way, and I actually think they like their jobs better.
Thanks. Thank you, Jen. Sheetal, what has been your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Pedro. Well, we originally had another provider who we were using for database completion, and that provider was mostly providing an update service, and we really needed a partner to help us in reviewing our database, making sure our consultant databases had all the right information. And we had been talking to Acuity for over a year about that process, and we decided to hire them when we really weren't seeing, it was just a different type of role, I guess, that we needed. And Acuity came on with us in October 2020. We didn't have a dedicated resource at our firm for database completion. So we relied really heavily on Acuity to run the process. They would help us with just not the quarterly updates, but also to clean up language, make sure additional data points that were missing were being filled in, and helping us really get to a point where we felt confident with the data that was in our databases. After seeing that engagement go well, we decided to hire Acuity for helping us with our DDQ process when we also had some natural attrition on the team. I actually have previous experience and had set up an offshore DDQ team in another firm, and that took us quite some time to get things right. And so with the support of Acuity, as well as my own learnings from my previous experiences, we were able to set a really strong training plan and then make sure that Acuity was included as part of our team. The DDQ team, their members of our team meet with us weekly, and allowed us to really increase our capacity and get that team up to speed very quickly. Now, 6 months into the engagement, we have increased our team capacity, provided our local employees more growth opportunities, as well as started, I mentioned earlier, I had a long-term content management project that Acuity has been helping us with, and we've been wanting to get that off the ground for the past couple of years.
Great, thanks, Sheetal. And Andre, Capital Group, sure we would all love to hear what your experience has been, sir.
For sure. So as far as key consideration goes, and it mirrors what Sheetal and Jennifer said, and I imagine will sound familiar to many in the audience. My team was just torn between working on new business requests, highly customized ones, and what one CG sales leader jokingly refers to as feeding the beast, right? So those standard but voluminous due diligence requests that occur every quarter or annually. But our sales partners have made it clear that growth and new business should really be our focus. So the question becomes, jokingly, how do we feed the beast, right? We've explored different tactics like automation, machine learning, but those left something to be desired at scale. So enter Acuity. We've been circling you guys for some time, but we really decided to pull the trigger when we experienced a really large surge in 2019. As far as our experience thus far, and I talked about this before, in planning our engagement, we really made a conscious choice to view our relationship with Acuity as a strategic partnership, not a transactional one. So during the onboarding process, we took deliberate measures to make sure you guys weren't just plugged in to our process and systems, but our culture as well, both the team and the organizations. After almost a year, we're on the precipice of a pretty strong and mature relationship with Acuity. Maybe a pro tip for those who are thinking about beginning their journey, it really is helpful to identify senior level team resources on the team to help flesh out your training programs and to really help manage the daily oversight of the partnership. So shout out to Nance Cruz, the senior resource who does that for us. But at the end of the day, we're really excited where the next 6 months are going to take us.
Thanks, Andre. I just want to reflect on 3 quick comments there for anyone who may be considering. 1, ensure you have a strong training plan. That's important because that will benefit and will result in huge ROI. Ensure that we are seen as an extension of your team and we understand your culture. That is also critically important. And you guys drive that discipline approach to leveraging us. And I would say if you do these 2, there are a lot of other things to do, but if you do these 2, you will get the best out of your onshore team. And there will be more focus on the new business opportunities, which ultimately is what you want them to, where you want them to be focused. So Salaja, positive feedback coming from 3 extremely happy clients. So well done to you and your team. Can you briefly describe your RFP practice and how do you manage to deliver results to the clients?
Sure. Thank you, Pedro. At the outset, really happy to hear this feedback. And I must say it's been a great pleasure working with Sheetal, Jen, and Andre. We are extremely proud of our partnership and being able to contribute to their long-term strategic vision. When I reflect over my 12 years journey, setting up RFP teams for asset managers of various sizes and different structures, there are many common challenges that we have come across, and what we heard today is no different. At Acuity, we have built an RFP ecosystem to address these challenges. Today, we have 100+ dedicated RFP and DDQ specialists working with over 30 clients as an extension of their in-house team, helping them complete DDQs, RFPs, institutional mandates, and digital DDQs as well. If I were to look back and analyze what makes us different, then our capital markets pedigree and focus on the asset and wealth management space comes to my mind. We understand this space across a broad spectrum of client areas, be it research or portfolio management or operations, and this has definitely helped us excel here. I think, Pedro, in your question, you correctly said that people are still at the core of the RFP process. So while setting up RFP teams, we focus on hiring the right talent. I've been hiring for these teams for many years now, and I strongly believe that an RFP writer has to be an all-rounder. They should have very good communication skills, strong, capital markets domain, project management, and should be able to multitask also. So as we hire, we keep all these aspects in mind. One word of caution, though, is this is a niche skill set. It's not easily available in the market. So our approach usually has been to hire the right fit resources and then groom them to be very talented RFP writers. For this purpose, we have created and curated very specific training modules, and those are could be domain trainings covering the broader asset management industry or different asset classes or specific areas within the RFPs like ESG or compliance sections, risk management, etc. And then we also have heavy Excel training because there's a lot of quantitative data that goes into most of these questionnaires and DDQs. And of course, not to forget the all important soft skills training program. So with this kind of approach, we've been able to build a very strong team and achieve the scale at which we are today. Then I would say another important differentiator is a layer of SMEs and supervisors or managers. We have built an RFP center of excellence here at Acuity with them. They help us set up, transition, and run teams for our clients. They oversee a lot of the day-to-day quality mechanism, be it process checks, training, people management, basically ensuring that all client SLAs are met. Again, I can tell you from experience that this takes away a lot of burden from our client RFP managers. Usually when I get onto calls with clients, especially the new clients, one question that often comes from them is, how do you start leveraging offshoring, or how do you start working with an offshore team for such a critical process like RFPs? Our recommendation is start at the lower complexity level, that is look at quarterly DDQs, content management, consultant questionnaires, and then slowly move up the complexity ladder, include the more high complex RFPs, institutional RFPs, and mandates. One immediate benefit of this approach is, as all our three panelists have been talking today, it frees up bandwidth for the onshore team, and it allows the onshore RFP writers to focus on key value add areas. And the result of that is there is a better resource retention as well onshore. But before I wrap up, I would definitely want to acknowledge that all RFP teams at Acuity are built truly in partnership with our clients. As Sheetal, Jen, Andrea briefly alluded to, clients treat our teams as an extension of their own onshore teams. They're very transparent in providing feedback. They actively participate in training and investing in the team. Of course, the results are out there for everyone to see.
Thanks, Alajo. Well said, well articulated, and well done to you. So I think it's time now to hear what the audience, what their questions are. I've been seeing a number of questions come in, so if you will bear with me, I will get to some of these questions. I think that the first question that I see here is, and Sheetal, this is to you. It's around ESG. How are global asset managers dealing with increased demand for ESG integration within the investment process? And has there been any impact from it on RFP operations or SME outreach?
Yeah, we have seen an increase in ESG product searches over the past few years. These RFPs typically focus on understanding what ESG factors are included in the portfolio construction process, how managers report out on that to investors, They also tend to ask more about proxy voting and engagement to understand if the manager's aiming to impact change with their portfolio companies. That said, I think the biggest change has actually been in recent years that investors are looking for ESG integration in all products, not just in ESG products. They're looking for not understanding our process as a whole. What are we doing as a firm to integrate ESG into everything we do?
Thanks. Thanks, Sheetal. Again, just scrolling through. Another question we have here is, have you ever considered or had success with outsourcing the first drafts of RFPs to a trusted external partner once a solid RFP library is built within a system such as RFP.io? Or do you recommend always keeping in-house, whether RFP staff is in headquarters or working remotely? Maybe Jen, we can
Sure.
that one.
Yeah, we definitely have. I said before we use Acuity for recurring requests, but we also, we've been doing that for almost a year and a half now, and we're pretty comfortable with the team that we have and the knowledge they have. So I would be comfortable with first drafts, and we do lean on them when we have, when we have issues with capacity at times. One thing I would say though is that the making sure that the library is up to date is key, right? Like you can't have an offshore team working in a library that's out of date and then expect them to be successful. So that's just key, and finding a solution for that is really important.
Okay, all right, thank you, Jen. Another question we have here, are updates on consultant platforms also completed by the RFP team? And if not, how is data accuracy ensured compared to what is shown in RFPs? Andre, maybe I can turn this one to you.
Sure. So at Capital, we do have a dedicated investment databases team. How we make sure that we create alignment during RFPs, right? That sense of having the right data be consistent throughout both the databases and our responses really just comes down to communication, partnering very closely with the investment databases team. They let us know when searches are ongoing on their end. When we receive RFPs, one of the first things, especially for those large institutional RFPs, we'll have writers do is reach out to that group to make sure, hey, check investment, check X database or Y to make sure the data is consistent. Is it up to date? And then we also leverage our content manager to help make sure that profiles are updated regularly. So it's really about communication if you have a group that focuses on investment database.
Great, thanks, Andre. Next question. Brief discussion about what RFP databases are used. How can you ensure data consistency, especially with dynamic data? Salaja, do you want to?
Sure, Pedro. Yeah, I think in terms of RFP databases, there are a lot of them, as I said, available in the market, and some of them which we briefly displayed today, which are the more common ones. I would say the choice of database is dependent mostly on which life cycle is your firm in, the size of your firm, what are your capacity constraints, how would you like to structure it? So that in itself is a very big deep dive discussion, one. And how do we ensure that, I think the second part is about how do we ensure data consistency. And that's what I was briefly trying to respond in my earlier question also, that if you focus on having a regular content update process, right? If you have a very specific process saying, okay, every week we go back and check, what are the new responses that we have added in our DDQs or RFPs, someone religiously pulls it out and then updates the content database. That's where we have seen that then it's very easy to pick up, and there is usually consistency across different RFP writers, irrespective of whether it's different onshore writers placed in different locations, or you have an offshore partner like Acuity, and there are onshore partners who are using the similar database. And In terms of quantitative data also, I think there has to be a process around sharing the common files, updating it in a uniform format, and also, if required, placing it on to the content databases. So I think at the end, it boils down to that rigor and having that regular process of, updating it on a, quarterly or sometimes quarterly, sometimes weekly. It again really depends on the number of questionnaires that you get.
Thanks, Alaja. I think we haven't necessarily touched on technology, right? So I have a personal question for you guys, maybe one of you actually, which is, when we go into our pitches, right, there's always that focus on using technology in the RFP processes. And obviously, the several databases have brought in new features, auto-link, auto-populate, etc. There are challenges, but have you adopted any of these newer features? And do you see any barriers or deterrents in implementing these? Andre, let's throw this one out to you.
Sure. It's a great question. So we found value in using AutoLink for translating content updates into our standard suite of RFPs. But when it comes to those new features, we really haven't found any efficiency gains at scale when it comes to leveraging things like AI or machine learning, especially when we think about completing like those really customized questionnaires. So that happens to be, like I said, in some of our earlier conversation points, that's really our focus, right? So maybe what I'll colloquially call like the buzzword-based tech, right? So machine learning, AI, automation, whatever it falls under. It's intriguing. I know they've made really impressive strides over the last few years, but we need it to be at a point where it can mimic a human at scale for it to be really effective for us. So I guess I would say if you are looking at a technology partner for a database, just focus on the things that I think are a bit more salient, traditional. So workflow management, SME collaboration, content management, things like that, rather than relying on the more flashy new capabilities.
Thank you so much, Andre. With 5 minutes left, that's the last question we will take. As I mentioned to everyone, there's a whole host of other questions. We will answer those and get those to you by the end of this week. But everyone would have seen Paul Alapat. Now, I'd love Paul to say a few words and to thank the panelists. But before I get Paul to speak, why have we invited Paul? So as Salaja mentioned, this vertical has been there for 12 years. Paul has been the chief architect behind, the fund marketing services, which Salaja manages. And obviously he saw the vision, which was, there is a business opportunity for us to potentially support asset managers in this space. So Paul, thank you for that. I think Jen, Sheetal, and Andrea are also saying thank you, but it will be great to get your thoughts and, a vote of thanks from you, Paul. Over to you.
No, thank you, Pedro. I think I'm, as a chief product officer, I oversee over 250 offerings to financial institutions. And it is no exaggeration to state that one of the most challenging offerings we manage is RFP support. It requires a very patient partnership. It requires realistic expectations. There is no silver bullet here. There is slow staffing. There is an understanding of the client's culture, of the company. There are a lot of nuances. You don't get it right the first time. So you need a lot of forbearance and patience from the client. And we've been fortunate that a lot of our clients have displayed that. It's definitely all the ones on the panel today. So thank you for that. Without this, we could never have started this practice. That said, it's been very satisfying what we've established, thanks to Shailaja and her team. And a lot of that's because there is certain value we bring in, that because we see so many participants, we can share with you best in industry practices for large, small, medium, whatever your size. We can tell you what RFP platforms are relevant for you. Does your volume justify having an RFP support team? So I think you can benefit from what others mistakes. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think so. That is one great value I think a lot of our clients appreciate. Then of course, this whole thing about outsourcing tedious, repetitive work. So you can focus on what is important, take what is urgent out. And in RFP, there's a lot of things that are urgent but not important. Then of course, we, under one roof, we provide, apart from RFP support, all the marketing support, digital marketing, etc. We also do investment compliance. We do data science. We do customized technology. So you pretty much don't have to go to various vendors. You can just sort of build a partnership with us, and that can be rooted with RFP. And within FMS, RFP is absolutely our flagship product. We're very proud of it. And it has been absolutely a red hot market this year. The company overall is benefiting from the macro tailwinds, which is supporting all financial institutions, but we are growing about 50%. The RFP team is growing about 60%. So it's almost like if we can staff enough, there is demand. And there is, I think, complexity changes, volume changes, and everybody wants customized answers. So everything all at once. And it is not easy staffing. So we're proud of what we've established. And I think the client sort of experience speaks for itself. So with that, I would absolutely sincerely thank Jennifer, Sheetal, Andre for sharing your real world experiences. There is nothing more useful than hearing what practitioners have to say. So it's been invaluable. And also for all your kind words about your experience. And if there are any unkind words left unspoken, share it with Pedro directly. And thank you for everyone in the audience. This has been one of our most popular webinars. We've had the largest registration ever. So thank you for your time and your attention. With that, I'll hand it back over to Pedro.
Thanks, Vol. Well said. I'd also like to thank our panelists this morning. I'd love to thank everyone who invested 1 hour of your time. I hope you don't think it was a waste of 1 hour. You will see the panelist details on screen. So our panelists are happy and they've kindly agreed, not sure for how long, but they've kindly agreed to take, if there are any other questions, comments, concerns, etc. They're happy to take, any questions from you. So you can see their contact details. And as you sign off, there will be a survey. So we please ask you for, for your thoughts as we look to improve, future webinars. So with that, we will conclude our webinar this morning. Thank you all for joining and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye now.
Thank you.